All right, let's call the organizational meeting to order, January 10th, 2024. Ms. Blau, please call. Roll call.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Bowser.
Here.
Mr. Hostetler.
Here.
Mrs. Pat.
Here.
And Mrs. McGraw. Here.
All right, and then as usual, first order of business, adoption of the meeting agenda. Hopefully everybody had time to look at it, if not earlier, at least right now. Does anybody have any suggested changes or comments on this? It's just a lot of stuff we do like every year, at the beginning of the year. All right, if nothing, then please call the roll.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So moved.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes.
Mrs. Pat.
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
All right, thanks. First order of business for the organizational meeting is nominations for the board president. And I'd like to nominate Laura McGraw.
I'll second.
Is there any other nominations? Not, is there a motion to close nominations? So moved.
Second.
All right, we just go right into the motion to elect
You have to take a vote.
on the close. All right,
Mr. Davis.
Yep.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes.
Mrs. Pat.
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw. Yes.
all right, so Laura McGraw has been nominated to be board president for the coming year. Is there a motion? Yes,
To elect.
to elect her to the board presidency.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes.
Mrs. Pat.
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Take it over.
Sure. Is there a motion to nominate the vice president to the board?
I'd like to nominate Josh Hostetler as vice president.
I'd like to second that.
Oh, I say call the roll, right?
There's a motion.
Close. You have to have a motion.
Yep, I'll make a motion to close nomination.
Second.
Is there a motion to elect Josh as vice president?
First, right?
Right. You have to.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Davis.
Yes, close nominations.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes.
Mrs. Pat.
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Carries.
Now is there a motion to elect Josh as vice president?
Yes, first.
Any seconds?
Second.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes.
Mrs. Pat.
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we go into the board appointments or?
Yes.
Okay, so the next part is the board appointments for various committees that are required for OSBA and for the British Lakes Board of Education, or British Lakes Career Center. 2 members are appointed. I'd like to be considered for the representative for British Lakes Career Center.
And I'd like to second that.
You would like to be the second.
Yes.
Second person.
Is that okay with everybody else?
Yep.
Yes. And then number 2 is accordance with section 3313.23 ORC. The Board of Education shall designate a treasurer pro tempore in the event of the absence of the treasurer. for any of the meeting during the calendar year 2024.
Unless you want, yeah, to be your person, so I'll be happy to do that, unless you want to be it.
That's fine.
That
Okay,
person,
Terry, I'm at
That's fine.
Chris is fine. Okay, and then number 3 is per Ohio School Board Association requirements, the board shall appoint a legislative liaison for the calendar year 2024. So for Terry, would you be interested in doing that position?
Yes, it would.
Terry. And then there's an alternate delegate for the legislative liaison to OSBA. Is anyone interested in that? Jen?
do it too, unless somebody else really wants to.
This. And then the last one is for OSBA requirements, appointment of a student achievement liaison for the calendar year of 2024. I'd like to do that.
you will do that, Laura?
No, we're seeing.
Oh, you see.
Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, Chris, Josh.
I will. Sure.
Josh will do that. Okay, is there a motion to appoint all of these people to these roles?
So
Was it second?
good.
Can you call the roll?
Mr. Davis,
Yes,
Mr. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes,
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item is the Board of Education 2024 regular meeting calendar. It's recommended that the board adopt the regular meeting dates, times, and locations for the 2024 calendar year for Exhibit 1B. Everybody been able to review those? Is there any changes?
can I just ask, Lisa, so did you check to make sure, it seems like every year when the 5-year forecasts are due, so it looks like the June one, now it's in June, right?
It's May,
So it's still May,
yes.
so it's May 15th, it seems like that's always like, is that still okay, or do we want to do that, like right now?
Well, it is pretty early. We kind of had this discussion on Monday. However, the kids are out of school on the 21st this year. May 21st is their, I'm sorry, what day?
Wait, May 22nd. is
May
early.
22nd. So I think 15. You know, I think it'll be okay. I'll just have to be super prepared. And reserve the right to possibly call a second.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to adopt the 2024 regular meeting calendar?
So moved.
Second,
Chris, second.
Mr. Davis?
yes,
Mr. Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler?
Yes.
Pat?
yes,
Yes. The next item is the service fund. In accordance with section 3315.15 ORC, the board shall establish and utilize a service fund for the calendar year 2024 in the amount of $5,000. Is there a motion to,
So moved.
second,
can I just ask what that is? You know, I was gonna ask. you.
Yeah, no, I think I asked the first time it came up too. Yeah.
So that's a fund that the board sets aside for any kind of activities that the board would do, such as professional development, capital conference, things of that sort.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis?
yes,
Mr. Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler?
Yes.
Mrs. Pat?
Yes,
And Mrs. McGraw.
yes.
Motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda and authorization and policy approval. Be it resolved that all the following items appear in the consent agenda and are adopted by the ones in one single motion unless a member of the board requests that any such items be removed from the consent agenda and voted upon separately. This is basically a whole list of all of the items that the treasurer is responsible for and the superintendent is responsible for. Is there a motion to approve all of these items?
Second.
Would you like to discuss any of them? Is there any discussion on any of them?
This is just a huge list here. I don't know, did you?
I looked at it earlier today.
It's just, yeah, every year we kind of do the same. It's just kind of, well, it's just, we looked at it, it's kind of like all the tons about the day-to-day operations and like that.
Is there any?
Let me call the roll. Roll call, please. Mr. Davis,
Yes,
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes. There being no further business to come before the board, is there a motion to adjourn the organizational meeting?
So moved. Second.
Can you call the roll?
Mr. Davis,
yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
So.
Do you want to go ahead and go straight into the next meeting?
Welcome to the regular meeting. Appreciate all of you in attendance. Thank you for coming.
You give her the keys and she just goes crazy.
Okay, we did the welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is there a motion to call it to order?
We just need to, I'll take the roll.
Take the roll.
Okay, Mr. Davis,
Here,
Mr. Bowser,
Here.
Mr. Hostetler,
Here.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes. Stand and do the pledge of allegiance. Super nerve-wracking. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
second,
Can you call the roll?
Mr. Davis,
yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Oh, district updates.
So the first update we have, January is Board Appreciation Month. And while this is the month that we acknowledge and recognize you for your service to the district, understand that we appreciate all you do and the sacrifices you give to the district and service to our students and community over the course of the year. Mr. Shens, as he does each year, is going to share your annual certificate with you, for those of you that have a scrapbook and keep those year after year. Mr. Davis probably has a phone book size version, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Shens.
Yes, so you guys can take these home and frame them tonight and make sure they're hanging up in your living room. But like George said, we definitely want to thank you guys, not just for your leadership and your service, but for your care and your compassion for all of the students, staff, and families in the Coventry schools. We appreciate you guys, so thank you very much. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. So as I shared, with Ms. Finnefrock in her last meeting in December, it's difficult to be a board member in best of times. And it was especially difficult during some of the times that all of you have been through. But we appreciate your service to Coventry and the Coventry students. The next one is ironic because I had targeted January for the discussion of our district's approach to the eclipse on April 8th. And we just had Akron Public Schools at the front page of the Beacon Journal yesterday announcing that they were going to close for that day to students. In doing some research, if you remember, I mentioned this early in the fall, and I've been watching to keep track of what Summit County and some of the area schools are doing. So based on my research, the schools in Medina and Wayne counties are both, all of the districts in those two counties are closing. And right now, we're one of 3 districts left in Summit County, still determining what to do in terms of the eclipse day. In talking to emergency management and some of the local or county agencies, the real concern, you know, when this first came up, I'll step back, when this first came up, I was kind of dumbfounded that, you know, that on an eclipse day, we would close school to students. But in talking to these agencies, the concern is they're estimating 1 million people coming into this area to experience the eclipse. That there's even groups that go around as eclipse chasers, that every time an eclipse comes anywhere in the country, they follow it. So the concern being, right now they're predicting it to start right around 2 o'clock to begin getting dark and go to the full darkness and then be back to normal by about 4:30. For us, that means our high school and middle school routes would be letting out right around 2:30, 3 o'clock. And my concern is the potential that if 1 million people descend upon our area without adequate places to stay, where are they going to camp up to experience the eclipse? Will they just pull off to the side of the road? Will they be pulling into our lots, you know, intermixing with our parents and pick up and drop off? And if that happens and our first route is delayed, then our elementary students would be stuck in the building until those routes could finish, get back, pick them up. I'm just concerned about how the potential for delay. My recommendation is that we close school on April 8th, similar to many of the other area schools. And in typical my luck, it'll be cloudy and it probably won't be that big of a deal. But I think the safest thing for us to do is to use a calamity day that day, close school. If we're wrong and it's cloudy and it ends up not being much of a to-do, then we're still not out anything compared to if we do have students here and we get into a position where we're stuck with students in the buildings or in buses on the roads in traffic. So if you had any input or had any thoughts, I wouldn't mind hearing those. Otherwise, I'll progress with informing the community that we'll close on April 8th to students.
There's an eclipse in the area in what, 2017? Did they see that kind of an influx, I wonder? Might have been a different time of day too.
One of the, I forget which agency talked, said that they had a lot of gridlock.
Yeah.
Because of when it was over, everybody just left all at the same time and the major arteries, traffic arteries clogged. In Tennessee was the one that was referenced.
And that was,
It might have been.
It wasn't.
Just seems like a.
The thing is, our area is in the very middle of the best place to see it, and probably the entire country, kind of all the way up through this. Ohio, from Columbus all the way up to Erie, and we're like right in the middle, What if people come and want to park on our facilities as well, they're driving around, and they want to park someplace, that could also be a problem with getting our students in and out, driving.
From the science end of it, I remember when it came through and I was still teaching. And for a teacher, you have moments to teach. And if it's planned correctly and if it's sunny, it was a great thing. I remember when we didn't have a total here, like Ms. McGraw was talking about going directly over, but you could still see on our shadow boxes, you could actually hold your hand out and have the sunlight go through it, and you could see your shadow of your hand. But in that mark on the sunlight on the pavement, a sidewalk, you could see that eclipse. So it wasn't like you had to do anything. And then, of course, leading up to that, we had several days that we were able to. And the English classes were writing about eclipses, and the history classes are what was happening before and the fear of the eclipses and stuff. And so we had, and then the art classes were in on it, and everybody was in on it. And then the math teacher right next to me, he was doing a thing on the speed of light. And so he was trying to calculate how much it would be, and the sunlight coming down is about 7 to 8 minutes to get from the sun down, and so how much of this and how much of that, what was the actual amount? He was getting into it pretty deep, so it's a teaching moment, and it should be a teaching moment, anytime we have a chance, just like taking our kids on some sort of field trip or anything else, teaching moments are important. And again, like you said, it could be a rainy day, you don't have that particular year, it was a good thing, and I was at Revere, so it's not like we were in a city. I wouldn't consider Coventry too much of a city either, as having gridlock, and a lot of people coming to Coventry to watch the eclipse. So I would rather have the opportunity for teachers to teach to the moment rather than it's not happening. Because if you let the kid go at home, who knows? The kid might stare at it. You always have to worry about kids not doing what they should be doing. I can see it, but for the bottom of my eyes, you know. I always get somebody on the side. Anyway, that's fine.
And Mr. Shens and I have heard from a few teachers, and I think we still encourage the teaching of it, the safe practices, and how the kids the families can experience it. It does fall in that difficult time frame. Our high school kids will be finishing up as it's beginning, and the elementary kids will be, I forget what they call the peak, when the term for the peak. Sure. But the peak is at, I think, 3:15, when I last read.
Yeah, I think ours was the late morning.
The totality is at 3:15, which is when the elementary kids are getting ready to leave. So it does fall at a difficult time from a teaching element, but I know Mr. Dudley has reached out to us as one that comes to mind, the most recent, that wants to talk about the different things that he could teach in his class and incorporate it in. So I believe there is still the opportunity that some of our staff members are going to still teach lessons related to it. I'm just concerned about potentially getting kids stuck. What that looks like. We're in staff stuff too.
Is that something we need to vote on? Like,
No, I could just call the calamity day. I just wanted to make sure I got your thoughts before we did that.
Yeah, it is too bad. We can have kids here in school to teach, but I understand the transportation issues, so yeah, I'm behind.
timing is bad.
It is.
And it's the consensus of most school districts in Ohio. It's not like it's,
That's, I don't know if it's a consensus, but yeah.
it's not like suggesting that some of these
Yeah,
students, because they're worried about safety, putting their kids in and out of
That's fair.
due to the timeframe.
So those were the only two items I had for superintendent's reports.
Do we have any special guests?
Not that I'm aware of.
He used to be at the.
Mr. Sheds Jr.
Do we have any citizen participation? So we have no education comments.
It's the new year, January. I don't know. We're right in the middle of everything. Sports are going. I enjoyed reading the wrestling. Was that a JV?
JV wrestling,
Yeah, it was a tournament. How many teams? 30?
35 teams.
35 teams. That was just thinking about it. You get 35 schools being represented in one spot. And then you'd have how many mats did they get?
Mats were everywhere.
Oh, yeah, you have to.
I'm not sure how many, but they were everywhere.
Now, did they just use the high school, or did they go down and use the middle school?
They just used the high school, but they used every location they could. And the whole gym was wrestling area. And then they even had some of the other lower tier, I don't know if the proper term would be lower tier kids went upstairs and used the wrestling room. I mean, we had people standing in the hall. I mean, we had the lineup boards in the hallway, the athletic Hall of Fame hallway. There were people everywhere. But, and what was also impressive is they had to move the buses because they needed to create more parking for the families here. So they moved the buses, and the middle school parking lot was just full of buses. Took up the whole parking lot. It was really cool to see, you know, schools from Cleveland to South Canton. It was really regional.
Teams that came in from
I didn't see any out of state, but, you know, in the Tuscarawas County, in South, there were teams from all over the region.
That's good PR for the
It was
school.
awesome. It was great for the kids.
People see that. That's a good thing. Very nice.
Mr. Shaw, organized that.
And Mr. Shaw and his staff put it together, yes. They are experts at putting tournaments together.
And they probably attended their good share.
And it was a great moneymaker for the program. They made thousands of dollars, and the youth wrestling was able to also make some funds as they took care of the concessions. So it was also a moneymaker for the program.
Good stuff.
I do have one thing. Mr. Murray, James Murray, some of you remember him, was a principal here for years and passed away in the last month. I don't remember the exact date, but I'd run into him about a month ago at a restaurant, and his health was failing, but he was still a strong man, and with a lot of good words about his years at Coventry. So I'd like to recognize him, and also Darlene Abernathy, who was a kitchen cook, for a head cook for many years, and lots of people remember she used to bring applesauce to everyone, to staff members, and her grandson was there and said that he remembered a time he negotiated getting out of the school suspension if he brought 2 quarts of applesauce in. I think it was to Greg Seuss, but anyways, but it was kind of fun, you know, but it was fun to be with them, and a lot of former students came and shared their love for her, and him also. So I was proud to be a comment at that point.
Yeah, happy New Year, everybody. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember driving by the middle school when the wrestling tournament was going on with my son Lucas in the car, and we were trying to figure out what the heck was going on. There were buses scattered everywhere. And happy to hear that was a success. And also just point out another thing from your report about 3rd grade. That was the reading, 82%. 82%. I don't have as much of a benchmark history as you do, but you said it was the best you had seen.
I've never seen a number that high. I mean, you have to remember that that's a test the kids are expected to pass at the end of 3rd grade.
Right.
And 82% of our kids passed it at the beginning of 3rd grade.
Yeah.
That's a testament to our staff and the work they've done, and to the kids for the hard work they've put in.
You end up with the highest percentage in some county.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Even more impressive.
Good job. That's great. Yeah. Oh, man.
That was the highest percentage, like not, they don't call it pre-test.
For the fall test.
The fall test.
Yep.
And then once they pass it,
They pass.
then they're done, you know.
Yeah, they take it again and their higher score counts, but
If it's done, I mean, that's like, you know, yeah, that's really awesome.
So we have at least 1 point on the report card.
Yeah.
We improved
There we go.
80%.
Yeah, all right. First step.
And the only thing I'll mention, maybe everybody knows now, but Miss Sandberg, who's one of the elementary school teachers, who was actually here at the last meeting, kind of pretty abruptly. It seemed like everything was cool. I talked to her like that day when she was kind of cleaning up. It seems like everything was great, but she has. And that was such a good team. And that presentation was so awesome that day. So, anyway, she's been a really good teacher. And she's also been all around. Yeah, she was, I mean, I didn't know she was at virtually all the buildings, which is great. So, yeah.
That's a lot to the district.
Definitely, 100%.
I just wanted to say thanks to Jerry for joining us, and you're kind of one of the reasons why I'm in the district. I moved here, chose Coventry, and went to a levy meeting because I didn't understand what levies were, and sat next to you just on a sheer coincidence. And I just learned a lot from you for those first couple of years, so I just wanted to thank you, and I'm excited to serve with you. So that's great. Also to our kids, you know, there's a lot going on with basketball and all the winter sports, just a whole lot. Get out to a bowling match or to a wrestling match. Yeah, it's gonna be super cool. And I know that in band, in February, there's gonna be like solo and ensemble, and there's gonna be some singing going on, so these kids are working hard to do some person singing an Italian opera. And I hear it all the time. So anyway, that's what I've done. Okay, next is we go to
Approval of minutes.
approval of the minutes, right? Oh. All right, so now we're gonna go to the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve last minutes from the 13th of, right? Yes.
So,
Mr. Davis,
yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Abstain.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Abstain.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes. Just you now. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure when it's past the baton. I've been here all this time and I still don't understand.
Everybody pay attention to the order of like events.
Okay, so under superintendent recommendations, item A, personnel certified. Retirement resignation, it's recommended the board accept the resignation due to retirement of the following employee for the position indicated, and that's Mrs. Baker. This is a troubled meeting, as Mr. Davis already talked about. We're losing some, or we're accepting the resignation of Mrs. Baker, and we've lost Mrs. Hammer. But Mrs. Baker does a fantastic job. She had actually previously been retired and stayed on with the district to help out for a number of years. But now she's going to retire and spend time with family. So we wish her nothing but the best at the end of the year. Number 2 is resignation. It's recommended the board accept the resignation of the following employee for the position indicated. And I just want to point out Mrs. Hamrick, this is a positive for her. It's a negative for us, but she's leaving on fantastic terms. She does an amazing job. She just learned that she had the opportunity to quote unquote retire. And so she took advantage of that opportunity, and we wish her nothing but the best in this next chapter for her and her family. Number 3 is long-term substitute. It's recommended the board employ the following as a long-term substitute for the 23-24 school year at a rate of $100 per teacher workday. When students are at school learning, long-term substitutes will report to their respective building to cover classrooms or assist where needed. Long-term substitutes will not be utilized when students are in remote learning. Long-term substitute pay is based on actual days worked. And this is Mrs. Ganser, who will be taking over for Mrs. Hamrick for the remainder of the school year. And that's effective January 3rd. Was that 3rd? Number 4, extended FMLA leave. It's recommended that the board approve an extended leave of absence for the following employee for the remainder of the 23-24 school year. And that's for Ms. Stacy, who has been on leave since the beginning of the year. And just as a reminder, she teaches statistics, algebra 2, and consumer math here at Coventry High School. Number 5 is rescind coaching supplemental. It's recommended that the board rescind the following coaching supplemental contracts approved at the September 20th, 2023 Board of Education meeting. And that's for Mr. Van Ness, who was not going to be able to volunteer with the team this year. And those are all of the items under personnel certified.
Motion to approve.
Second. Have any comments or? I just want to say Ms. Baker too, you're right, she's like actually physically my neighbor. And when my older son Phoenix started here as a kindergartner, I just remember still like he was tiny, he was like tiny. And when she saw him in all, she's like, "Oh, you neighbor?" He was like, his eyes are like this big, like a neighbor working here. But yeah, she's awesome. So that is no loss. And I did meet Paige Ganser when that same day.
Same day.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's not like super fortuitous for us. Coincidence that, I think Danny, I'm not even sure who met.
Yeah, I met her in Acton.
Okay,
We were
you
in
met.
a mock interview day.
Yeah.
My mom's a principal in Springfield. She has a big education background. She's gonna do great.
Yeah.
Good start.
So it was perfect time. It was just literally like just before when she met up. So awesome. She seemed fantastic too. Very, very, very positive.
So,
Is there any more discussion? You call it all.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
yes.
staff,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item B, personnel classified. Number one, resignations. It's recommended that the board approve the resignation of the following employees. The first one, Miss Dillon, is a bus attendant. She was leaving us to pursue employment in another district. And Miss May, who is just resigning from this position to take another position in item number 2. So change in hours, buildings, positions. It's recommended the board approve a change in the hours, building, and/or position for the following employees effective January 3rd, 2024. That's for Miss Williams, Miss May, Miss Cease, as listed. And number 3, it's recommended the board employ the following to approve classified substitute list, and that's Mrs. Danko, who is a retiree of the district and is coming back to really do us a favor as we are really struggling on the bus driver side of things. We have a number of bus drivers that have been in and out due to some surgical procedures and different things. Ms. Danko's license is going to expire here before the end of the year, and she was willing to come back and substitute for us until the license expires, as she's not planning to pursue renewing her bus driver license. So we're very appreciative that she's coming back to help us out. And those are all of the items under personnel classified.
Is there a motion to approve these recommendations?
Second.
Is there discussion?
Look at you.
If not, would you call it? Yes.
On their licensure, is that from their birthdays, or is that a year to year, or how do they work that?
For the bus license,
For the bus license?
I believe because it's an endorsement of their driver's license, it would be by their birthday.
Their birthday.
I'm assuming that, but I believe because it's attached as an endorsement, it
Correct.
goes by their birthday.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Bowser.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item C, other business. For number 1, foreign exchange students, recommended the board waive payment and accept the following foreign exchange student to attend Coventry High School for the 24-25 school year. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that young person's name, but she is from France. Number 2 is our school calendar. It's recommended that the board adopt the school calendar for the 24-25 school year for exhibit S1. And I'd like to point out that, some of the feedback I received over the last 2 years, this calendar brings that feedback into play. The main consistent feedback that I had received was that could we start a little later in August? So you'll note on the calendar that we're starting the 3rd week of August instead of the 2nd week, which pushes back the end of school just a tad, but we're still assuming that there's a good winter next year. We would still be ending in May and not rolling into June. The other changes, due to voting being in the schools, Mr. Shenz and I talked about, and he actually was excited about moving. If you remember, we added a few in-service days. This year, we had our in-service days early in the September-October range is where we typically target those. But next year, being that there's voting in the schools, and we expect that to be a very large election, I felt it was enhancing safety to have an in-service day that day just to be safe. And he actually thought it was actually beneficial to the staff to move the in-service and the learning back a little bit to give us a little more time to plan and be a little more aware of what our needs are for the staff for that in-service day. Beyond that, it's a very traditional calendar. We match up perfectly on Christmas and spring break with the PLCC. which is a benefit to those students, so that they actually get a spring break and Christmas rather than going half days when we're off, when we're not aligned with them. But beyond that, it's a very traditional calendar from that standpoint. Next we have revised policies and procedures. It's recommended the board complete the first reading of the revised policies and or deleted policies and procedures for discussion only for Exhibit S2. I'll point out that IGD, the only changes there are some changes to the legal references. IGDJ, the second one, the removing academic from the requirements for participating in homeschooling, and that aligns with the recent budget bill that was passed, which really allows homeschool parents to homeschool without much oversight from us. So they just let us know that's what they're doing, and the majority of the other requirements that had existed are gone. KGB, this language, which I thought was interesting, that we didn't have prior language prohibiting the possession and use of drugs on district property. But there's a paragraph that was added to that about, and I'm not sure if that's related to the legalization of marijuana in our state, but they did put some language in there prohibiting possession, use, distribution of illegal drugs on school district campus. And those are all the items under other business.
Is there a motion to approve these recommendations?
So moved.
Second.
If something is against the law, why do we have to have it in school board policy? Isn't that, it just seems redundant to me, the drug portion.
And there wasn't a lot of explanation attached to it. I just was assuming that it was related to the legalization issue. But they didn't give us much background knowledge as to why they were adding that paragraph in.
Any other discussion?
But there's still like no smoking policy,
Well, absolutely.
so it doesn't really matter, like.
No, yeah.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Sure. I just have one recommendation this evening under the treasurer's agenda. It is recommended that the board approve the POs over 5,000 per exhibit T1. If you didn't see the exhibit today, I'd just like to note that there was a last minute request by the maintenance department to add a blanket purchase order in the amount of 10,000 for purchase services related to maintenance. So this is any last minute needed repairs for electric, plumbing, any kind of service, or we would need someone come in and help support our team. But other than that, all the other ones are the same that have been listed.
Is there a motion to approve this recommendation?
Moved.
Second.
Is there discussion?
The blanket PO for purchase services district-wide, is that the old PO run out, or are they expecting
Yeah.
maintenance?
Yes, they had an original, so far this year, they had a $35,000 blanket purchase order for services, and that has been fully expended. So this is the second one.
Okay, so we did 35,000 in half a year, so we may have to come back again.
Yes, yes. We're trying to limit the amounts that we're maintaining on blanket goes.
Is there something specific that keeps coming up, or is it multiple things that are?
Multiple random variety of things. Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Bowser,
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler,
Yes.
Mrs. Pat,
Yes.
and Mrs. McGraw.
Yes.
Motion carries.
of Education. Okay. Is there Board of Education recommendation items, the resolution to authorize OSBA to review policies per HB 33. It's recommended that the board approve the resolution authorizing OSBA to review policies in light of HB 33 legislative changes that impact ODE in the State Board of Education for Exhibit 1B. E1, sorry.
Right?
Is there a motion to approve this change?
Second.
Is there discussion?
Are we creating jobs for OSBA? So are we creating jobs for OSBA?
We're not paying.
They could pay some.
Somehow. Exactly.
That's
From us.
All right, is there any follow-up?
Mr. Davis? Mr. Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler?
Yes.
Mrs. Cap?
Yes.
And Mrs. McGraw?
Yes.
Motion carries.
There's no executive session this evening.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there discussion on that?
I don't think we're.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler?
Yes.